The House will please come to order. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It seems we are the third month, the seventh day, which would be 307 day. So welcome back to the 16th day of our session. I think we have a phone going. All right, members, we are pleased to have with us this week Father Cronkleton from the Cathedral of St. Mary. So if he would please open our day and our week in prayer. Thank you, Father, for being here.
Let us pray. Lord God, as we enter into the last week of this session, with this last day for bills which came to this chamber from the Senate to be reported out of committee, we ask that you be with us. There is still much work to be done, and time is fleeting. Give us your gift of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Grace us with patience. Guide our debate and our votes. As we share in your divine work of governance, let us remember that we are your and the people of Wyoming's servants, striving to do what promotes the good of all in our great state. Should disappointment and frustration come upon us, let not these emotions rule us, but rather let charity and respect be our guides, and let humility be our measure should we gain success and achieve our goals. We ask all this in all things through your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Father. We'll look forward to you with the rest of the week. We appreciate that. All right, let's do roll call, please.
Convening roll for the 16th day, Monday, March 7th, 2022. Andrew. Excused. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly.
Here.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flittner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermueller. O'Hearn. Excused. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Excused.
Here.
He's here. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson.
Here.
Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Excused. Mr. Speaker. Oakley. Mr. Speaker, 57 present, 3 excused.
Thank you. So we are pleased to have Representative Blackburn back. Hopefully his and I'm confident Mrs. Blackburn is glad he's back too. As you note from the from our online, we have a couple members who are not able to be here for medical reasons, but they are still participating from where they can, and so we're glad to see Chairman and Wilson, Representative Simpson, and Madam Minority Floyd Conley are joining us. So glad you're still part of our process. We have some privileges apparently. Chairman Harshman, please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Privilege of the floor. And members, as we know, there's a couple folks, not necessarily behind the scenes, that really make this whole place run. One's the chief, obviously, and then our secretary here in the corner, Miss Pam Landry. I'd like to introduce you to a special guest of Pam's this morning, because she can't come out on the floor. And she said, "Oh, don't do it." Oh, and I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna." So anyway, I want to introduce you to Pam's youngest daughter, Christine Landry, is here this morning. She's an East High School grad. I believe she was a valedictorian back in the day. She's here to spend some time and watch us work. So thanks for joining us today, Christine.
You don't have to wonder where she gets her smile when if you know her mother. Big heart and a beautiful smile. Two ladies. Representative Craigo, please.
Bridge of the floor, Mr.
Please
Speaker.
proceed.
Thank you. I'd like you all to help me welcome our school board from Johnson County and our superintendent. They help keep all of our schools running top notch in Johnson County. If you all would stand up, please. Thank you.
Welcome to the House. I hope you had a good tour last night with Representative Craigo, so appreciate that. Any other privileges? Any other privileges as we start our day? Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of March 4th, 2022 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Provenza and Harrelson.
All right, members, so as we get toward the last days, a lot of bills to sign, and then we're going to go into concurrences here. We've got a joint conference committee reports and then concurrences. So the chief clerk has passed out a list. Do we have a list that gone out to the members? There should be a salmon-colored piece of paper. Icky pink is apparently, yeah, so that'll give you your list of concurrences. And then you can go to the website, pull up that bill, and those messages will be there. So we only have one JCC. It's only on House Bill 1, Senate File 1. So that ought to be pretty straightforward. So currently with that order of business of the signing of enrolled acts, the first enrolled act, number 9.
House Enrolled Act, being original House Bill 45, an act relating to environmental quality, authorizing and requiring the Department of Environmental Quality and the Environmental Quality Council to establish a voluntary assigned trust option for reclamation bonds as specified, specifying requirements for voluntary assigned trust, specifying that any voluntary assigned trust proceeds are held in trust by the state on behalf of each operator's permit or license for fulfilling all of the portion of the reclamation requirements, requiring rulemaking and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign enrolled act number 9, being original House Bill 45. I have so signed. Next enrolled act, 10.
House Enrolled Act 10, being original House Bill 43. An act relating to game and fish, modifying license allocations for resident and non-resident hunters for the grizzly bears, mountain goats, bighorn sheep, wild bison, and moose, imposing lifetime restrictions on bighorn sheep, wild bison, and moose, creating exceptions, making conforming amendments, repealing obsolete language, requiring rulemaking, and providing for an effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 10, being original House Bill 43. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 11.
House Enrolled Act 11, being original House Bill 39. An act relating to professions and occupations, establishing a procedure by which applicants for licenses and certifications can seek a pre-application determination as specified, authorizing the access and dissemination of criminal history record information for pre-application determinations as specified, making conforming amendments, authorizing a fee, authorizing rulemaking, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 11, being original House Bill 39. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 12.
House Enrolled Act 12, being original House Bill 7. An act relating to commercial vehicles, amending offenses that disqualify a person for life from driving a commercial vehicle, amending rulemaking requirements, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 12, being original House Bill 7. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 13.
House Enrolled Act 13, being original House Bill 65. An act relating to ad valorem taxation, specifying that an appeal in the timely filed is postmarked or transmitted before the filing deadline, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 13, being original House Bill 65. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Bear. Next Enrolled Act 14.
House Enrolled Act 14, being original House Bill 79. An act relating to unemployment compensation, specifying that monies in the fund shall not revert, requiring reporting, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 14, being original House Bill 79. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 15.
House Enrolled Act 15, being original House Bill 87. An act relating to insurance, amending requirements for eligible and authorized investments by domestic insurance companies, including investments in foreign jurisdictions, providing for an exemption to the requirement that the insurer holds its invested assets at a financial institution with a physical location in Wyoming, providing definitions, providing exemptions as specified, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 15, being original House Bill 87. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 16.
House Enrolled Act 16, being original House Bill 88. An act relating to civil procedure, amending public notice requirements for name changes of minors, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 16, being original House Bill 88. I have so signed. Congratulations, Chairman Harshman. Next Enrolled Act 17.
House Enrolled Act 17, being original House Bill 108. An act relating to funeral services practitioners, clarifying the definition of embalming, revising education requirements for funeral service practitioners, revisiting requirements for reciprocal licenses, providing applicability, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 17, being original House Bill 108. I have so signed. Congratulations, Dr. Hallinan. Next Enrolled Act 18.
House Enrolled Act 18, being original House Bill 110. An act relating to professions and occupations, providing for the licensure of persons practicing behavioral analysis, providing licensure exemptions, providing for the suspension or revocation of behavior analysis license, providing for criminal history background checks, modifying the composition of the Wyoming State Board of Psychology, providing definitions, making conforming amendments, repealing obsolete provisions, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 18, being original House Bill 110. I have so signed. Next, Enrolled Act 19. Congratulations, Representative Larson Lloyd. Sorry. Next, Enrolled Act 19.
House Enrolled Act 19 being original House Bill 125, an act relating to labor and employment, requiring the Director of the Department of Workforce Services to provide information and guidance to employers and employees regarding workplace injuries, requiring reporting, making a conforming amendment, and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 19, being original House Bill 125. I've so signed. Congratulations, Representative Conley. So members, Representative Baer, Harshman, Hallinan, Lloyd Larson, Conley, congratulations on your bills today. We're at that order of business of bills of consideration of joint conference committee reports. The first report for our consideration is Joint Conference 1 on House Bill 1, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move Joint Conference Committee 1 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll walk through the what transpired in the conference committee, but I just want to point out some of the highlights on this before we kind of walk through the documents themselves. And you'll see those documents. You have 2 or 3 of them will be on your desk. The primary one will be the summary sheet that we'll walk you through, but I just want to reaffirm that this particular session was probably the easiest and least controversial budget in the 8 years that I've served on appropriations. And so I would commend our folks down the hall. Whenever we had an issue, typically our process was to come to a compromise and work through it, as opposed to fight and kind of bully up and cram one thing down the other side. So it was a very friendly atmosphere, and our conference committee went very smoothly. Essentially, we just took the House side and the Senate side and cut it in half, following that same practice. And we'll talk a little bit what that means. In the biggest picture, what it means is an additional, per biennium under this budget bill, an additional $84 million combined will go to education, on the education side of the balance sheet, which will go to a long ways of helping resolve the one component of our budget, which is that it is not balanced and is operating in the deficit. So we'll walk through those numbers. Just to give you a few of the larger numbers, this total budget without savings is $2.64 billion. $2.64 billion. If you add in the savings, it goes up to 2.87. But that's because when you appropriate to savings, that's considered an appropriation on the balance books. But in terms of the general operations of government, it's 2.64 billion, which, as you know, would be about the lowest in more than 10 years. So we worked hard to keep our expenses down and to recognize that even though we have one-time inflection of dollars, that it's a conservative budget, and we're doing good things. And so what happened in the budget bill? In the big picture, we added $104 million to the budget. But what's important about that is 75 million of that is matching dollars for the infrastructure bill that's coming out next year. And if you recall, that infrastructure bill has about $1.4 billion in it, and it requires various matching components. So we're going to have money set aside in order to capture and take advantage of that infrastructure bill. So if you take that out of the picture, then our budget is roughly $40 million lower than what the good chief executive presented it to us at the beginning of the session. So with that, I'll turn over to the good representative from Fremont County and from Natrona County to walk through the summary sheet for you.
So members, the summary sheet is the oversized sheets. There should be 2 of them. And Representative Walters, are you starting us off here? All right, Representative Walters, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, members, we're working on the Joint Conference Committee summary report sheet. It is the large, almost tabloid-sized sheet, and it looks just like what we had before. And so we're on page 1 of that, and so all of the items, there's 32 items on page 4. All of those were identical items, mirror amendments, as we will. And so what the Joint Conference Committee did is we just split them down the middle. And so items 1 through 16, we adopted the House side and deleted the Senate side. And then items 17 through 32, we adopted the Senate version and deleted the House version. Again, those were the mirror amendments. And I don't know that you can all read the description on the right-hand side of that page, so I'm not going to go through those, and would ask if there's any questions on those, just hop up and ask. But again, those are mirror amendments that were passed in both bodies.
So members, any questions on items 1 through 32, which is page 1 of the summary sheet? Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Speaker, excuse me, thank you. And now we're on page 2, starting with item number 33. And this was we adopted we adopted the other body's second reading amendment number 1, division number 3, that was corrected. And this is for in the Chief Executive's office for the FNRPA dollars, and this just adds some footnote language that allows those FNRPA dollars to be used for litigation relating to treaties between the U.S. and federally recognized Indian tribes. Then we move on to item 34, and we deleted this item. This was an amendment from the other end, third reading amendment number 1, and these are stuff that are in the reports bill. Moving on to item number 35, we adopted the amendment for second reading amendment 35 from the other end of the hall, and this is in relation to the Chief Executive's office. And this just makes effective immediate the Black Hills National Forest Revision Plan, so that the appropriation is effective immediate, so we can get to work on that forest plan and hopefully save the timber industry up in that part of the state. Moving on to item number 36. This is the first time you'll see this, a DFA. So this is a delete and further amend, and that's how the conference committee goes about making changes, is you delete and further amend. And so this is in relation to the constitutional amendments. So there's currently 1 that was passed a year ago. There's 4 others going on in this session, and they don't all cost the same. And the reason they don't all cost the same is because it's for advertising, and it's a column block rate within a newspaper. It's pre-negotiated, but based on the size of these amendments, it's the known cost, and so it increases the cost to the Secretary of State's office of $445,000 for a total of $509,000. And then we added language that said those funds will revert at the end of this calendar year, December 31st, 2022. And that's just because we can draw the dollars back in. We'll know by then what has gone on with those constitutional amendments. Moving on to 37, again, a delete and further amend. This is from the other body. It's third reading amendment number 2 from their end. And this is in regards to adding some positions into the state treasurer's office. And so we added 3 full-time positions and indicated that they will be 2 accountants and 1 managing accountant. And that is, and the special revenue dollars, so this is investment dollars to pay for these positions. And the other end of the hall, they believed that there was a need for more accountants within that office, and they made a case for that. And so again, it's not general funds, it is special revenue. And then we eliminated in their amendment, they had a $1 million special revenue for contract accounting services, and there was a concern that that would be a doubling of funds towards accounting services, contract services, and so we eliminated that $1 million. And I see somebody, Mr. Speaker, has gone to the mic. Do you want to take these one at a time or page by page, Mr. Speaker.
Actually, let's just take, because we're getting into the delete and further amend stuff, so I think we just take them as they come. So members, as you see something that you want to come to the mic on, let's let the Appropriations Committee folks walk through it, and then we'll take it. So I'll go with, let's go with Mr. Majority Floor Leader first, and then we'll come across.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Just a quick question on line item 36. It looks, it looks like that was a House position to increase by 445. It doesn't look like there was a Senate position, but instead of being in between, it increases to 509. So it doesn't look like it's between the two positions.
Okay, I'll go to the next question, Representative Brown, and then and I think we're going to do this as second reading type approach. So present, take questions, and then respond. So Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick question in regards to the treasurer's positions. Two questions. First of all, how many positions had we eliminated out of that office over the past 5 or 6 years? And the reason I'm asking this is if we're doing a 2-to-1 ratio, being here for the past 6 years, one of the things that we looked at was span of control and management. It seems like we are putting one manager in charge of 2 employees and kind of inflating that cost. I'm wondering if there could have been a position that could have taken 3 employees, and we already had a manager that could have taken those positions. I'm just kind of curious on those, if I could get some answers. Thanks.
All right, so any members on any of the, let's see, 33 through 37, and then we'll let Representative Walters clean this up and then continue on. Representative Walters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer those questions, referring to the item number 36, the 509 was the actual number after the House amendment. And so there was no need to go to between 2 positions. It's just pointed out that after we added to the 445 to the existing appropriation of 64,000, I believe it was, it gets you to the 509. So there was no actual increase in that. The reason it was a delete and further amend is because we added the language as to when those funds would revert. Had we not added that language, they would not revert until the end of the biennium. So the only thing that was amended there was the language to revert at the end of this calendar year, December 31st. As to the question on item number 37, there's currently, I believe, 8 or 9 accountants within that office. We're adding 2 more total accountants and 1 managing accountant. And the reason we structured it that way is because currently there is no managing accountant classification within that office. And so we wanted to ensure that there would be somebody to kind of keep track of what all the accountants were doing. And so it's really just this managing accountant isn't just over these 2 new accountants, it's a total to the entirety of the office. And so currently there was no position set in that part of the office that was for a managing accountant. And so we wanted to make sure one of them would be a managing accountant to make sure that all of the accountants knew who they reported to, and there was somebody adding a little bit of guidance and direction to that part of the office. And so again, this is not a span of control issue. This is a totality of the office.
Representative LeBeau, did you have a question on something prior to 37 and prior?
I do prior, sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
On item number 33, what does it mean specifically adds footnote to allow funds for litigation relating to treaties between the U.S. and federally recognized tribes? And my other question is on item number 35, specific to the Black Hills National Forest Plan, is there any litigation or anything related to Indian tribes in that footnote as well? And what does footnote mean?
Any other questions? Any other questions? And we'll let another appropriator take on some of those. Representative Larson, if you want to take on those 2 inquiries, please.
If I may, Mr. Speaker, please. So on item 35 regarding the Black Hills National Forest Plan, that does not have anything to do with any tribes in the area or in either state. It really has everything to do with timber harvest and the timber harvest plan in that state. 33 members, you'll remember that we had a similar amendment on our side that was withdrawn, and this will allow, but this amendment as adopted would allow counties in the state to use the natural resource policy money that we use for litigation on if a county or state has an ongoing litigation relating to tribe, and this is specific to the one north here on I-25 and the that ongoing litigation, but that's what it's relevant to.
Thank you. So any other questions up through 37? Seeing none, please continue, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're on to item number 38. This was a House third reading amendment number 3, and it was deleted, and it was in reference to the elimination of the referencing chief executive officer in the state treasurer's office. So the opportunity will be there for a CEO or a COO. Moving on to number 39, this is a delete and further amend. This comes from our friends down the hall. Second reading amendment number 1, Division 2, adopted and corrected. And so there's 3 things going on in this amendment. And the first one relates to the Military Department and Veteran Services. And our friends down the hall had eliminated $267,421 from the Veteran Services, and this was for the State Veterans Museum in Casper. And so that is deleted, so the State Veterans Museum will be fully funded this biennium. The next 2 are in regards to the mineral severance tax and the federal mineral royalties. And this is what I would describe as the second caps. My good colleague will also be going over this same discussion, but if you took out the other piece of paper that is with your big stuff, there was a packet of information you all received this morning, but it discusses this. And so in last year's budget, if you look at the highlighted area on either the federal mineral royalties or on the severance taxes, the yellow highlight in the bottom right corner, there was a different distribution of what we call a second cap, and this is how it was divided this year. And so in the severance tax, anything over 155 million will go 1/3 to the budget reserve account, 1/3 to the school foundation program reserve account, and 1/3 to the general fund. And then if you go to the federal mineral royalties, again, this is the second cap. So FMR's over 200 million, as this sheet indicates in the lower right corner where it's highlighted yellow, 60% to the budget reserve account and 40% to the school foundation program. So that was how we addressed that. And my good colleague will probably highlight that again as we get into the discussion, as this was tied into some other actions that were taken. So moving on down to item number 40, we adopted the House third reading amendment number 4 for $70,000 for rangeland health assessment program grants. Item 41, we deleted. It was House third reading amendment number 7. And it's really tied into number 42 and 43 as well. And this is the $150,000 general fund for the DEQ to work on agreement state status with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission for rare earths. And so what we said on this is, yes, we want it to happen, but spend up to $150,000 within your existing budget instead of new money to make this happen. Other than that, the language was essentially the same. Moving on to item number 44, this is House second reading amendment number 12, and it's related to number 45 as well, House third reading amendment number 8, and this is in regards to the pathways, or I think is how I would best describe it, the active transportation programs, and so this was deleted, and so unfortunately those won't go forward. I would note that within the state parks budget, there is $2 million for outdoor recreation that could be applied to these kind of activities. Moving on to number 46, we deleted this. This came from our friends down the hall, third reading amendment number 5, division number 1, and this was really just a restatement of current law, and so it was not needed. And then item number 47 was adopted. It's a House second reading amendment 13 in the State Construction Department. And this is to make effective immediate the $1 million general fund for the acoustic studies and remedies for here in the Capitol building. So those are the first 2 pages. Again, the first page was all identicals. Happy to take any questions on those. And then happy to take any questions here on page number 2.
All right, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So with respect to line item 43, regarding the study, for agreement state status, for the future development and to move things forward, rare earth minerals. I'm just curious of, the simple fact the ask was there is that we look at, these are fee-based programs. So I know the good vice chair of appropriations was with me on minerals when we stood up the agreement state status. And we appropriated forward with the concept of recapture once that program was stood up. This initial study is just the first step forward. Was there any discussion about that maybe these funds could come from the money given to the chief executive for with respect to energy development? Or to me, it seems like a really bad position to have them take that out of their existing budget when most of their budget is fee-based. So I'm just curious. I'm not going to blow up the budget over it, but darn.
Thank you. Representative Washut, then Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With regards to the active transportation grants for trails and so forth, a little explanation on why we didn't just split the difference there, why we completely deleted. I know it's real important to some of my constituents.
Thank you. Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think my question was just asked. Thank you.
Second on the question. Any other questions on the second page, first or second page? First or second page? All right. Looks like Representative Larson is up for someone responding. Please proceed.
To the good chairman of Minerals, we did have conversations similar to those that you inquired, but they do have the funds in their administrative budget, not in the division budget, that they felt that they could do that. So that was the decision. Not that it couldn't come out of future funds like we do with the existing uranium one.
All right. Someone want to respond to the questions on 44 and 45? Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As to the question as the active transportation systems, the items number 44 and 45, these were really part of a larger package as it was discussed within the conference committee. And so as we get on to the next couple of pages, you'll notice that the $9.3 million for the ECA, we maintained the House position to keep that in place. We also maintained the $10.8 million for the increase to the employee compensation program that we're doing. And so as we did those two items, we had to give up something, you might say. And so we gave up the active transportation system as well as the $5 million to retiree benefits. And if you do the math, that the House actually comes out in a stronger position than where our friends down the hall did. But as I said, it was part of a larger package as we tried to split the difference across the entirety of the budget, not just necessarily each budget item.
Chairman Nicholas, you want to weigh in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to follow up on that, so our good friends down the hall were, I would say, had their feet in concrete on this particular issue. They just said that there's no plan, no specific where it's going to go, how it's going to go, and we quibbled and quibbled with them over this numerous times, and ultimately it was their suggestion that the tourism come back with a more of an outline proposal and use part of their reserve funds for this next year. So that's kind of where it landed.
All right, further discussion, page 1, page 2, page 1, page 2, going to page 3. Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll turn with me to page, excuse me, page 3 at the top on item, I'll get on page 3 also. Mr. Speaker, if you'll start with me on item number 48, and if you'll look down and coordinate that with item 61, both of these are technical corrections. On item 48, we delete the House position, and on item 61, we adopt the Senate position. These are technical corrections in the bill, and the reason we took the Senate position is because some of the actions up in the House position had already were eliminated, and the Senate position was more accurate in the technical corrections. On item number 48, we deleted and further amended Senate third reading amendment 23. You'll recall they had an amendment in there that talked about trying to adjust Wyoming's FMAP, which is the federal reimbursement rate or the matching rate on healthcare financing on Medicaid. Currently, we're one of the few states that's at 50-50. And the amendment that came through here said, directed the Department of Health to engage with the CMS to do that, but that's a congressional action. And the discussion has to be with them. And so we directed them to work with the congressional delegation and whoever to adjust the FMAP rate. Now, I want you to be careful not to read into this anything other than adjusting the FMAP rate. It's not including additional populations. It's not expanding Medicaid. It's not doing anything of the nature. It's just to increase our FMAP rate. And then the second component of that is to the Department of Health has indicated that we may want to participate with other states in trying to extend out this enhanced FMAP that was part of the public health emergency associated with the COVID-19. Again, isn't adding population, isn't expanding Medicaid, just trying to carry those enhancements further. And so we corrected the language on there to accommodate that. On item number 50, you'll recall that we had an amendment there to for $900,000 to capture $7,000 for the Department of Age and our senior citizen centers. We found out that we could probably use some of the general funds that have already been appropriated to be matching funds, and so we reduced that general fund ask by half and made it $478,000. And if that isn't sufficient, we can come back in the supplemental budget and make an additional request. On item 51, this is Wyoming Home Services, and there's some question on the clarity of the language that existed on footnote 5. This language just indicates that indeed the intent of the legislature is to fund that in the supplemental budget to move it forward into 2024. On item 52, 53, and 54, they're all related to the community juvenile service boards. We had funded that in and made some requirements with $3 million. They had come in at 1.2. Both of them had an appropriation of $250,000 effective immediately to fund the existing juvenile service boards around the state for this fiscal year we're in, and then carry out. We met in half at $2 million for the biennium, which is where this agency's budget for the community juvenile service boards was prior to about 2016, when they started taking all the other cuts. And so this will allow them to expand that and coordinate that program more statewide. On 55, this is the footnote that we found to be, what's the word? No, not germane. Thank you. we found this amendment to be not germane, and the Senate carried it through. We had, I would suggest that this was probably if there was a lot of discussion on this amendment, and we come back and adopted language that once we heard what the real concerns, at least what I deemed the concerns were, voiced from constituents around the state, back to legislators and at the University of Wyoming. It had less to do with gender studies and more to do with the general education requirements of students who are taking non-liberal arts degrees. And so we changed that language that they had to provide a report on that. For example, requiring them to take some general education requirements when it really wasn't perhaps necessary. And so that conversation will continue to take place with the university. On items 56 and 57, well, Mr. Chairman, maybe we ought to take this.
Any questions on 48 through 55? 48 through 55, Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On 55, so a couple of things. One, I think generally this body has decided that reporting requirements by themselves that don't have to do with appropriations tend to go in the reporting bill, which is why we created that reporting bill, because they were becoming less and less germane to the budget bill. But I'm curious here on how this is a middle position between removing gender studies and not germane, to have a position where it's a report on all education requirements, which seem to indicate that it's more than just gender studies. So if you could explain how this is a middle position. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And you know, a little discussion on you know, the way it's crafted, it makes the assumption, I think, that perhaps for an engineering student, right, that you shouldn't have to take any non-engineering sort of courses, general education courses. And I just think back 40 years ago when I graduated as an engineer, I took anthropology, archaeology, 600 level anthropology. I was required to take a certain level of lots of history courses. I was required to take a lot of coursework that was not related to my major. But in the end, it benefited me as a human being, being required to do that. So I'm just wondering, you know, where do you think this is going? Where does this amendment go?
Any other questions on those? Representative Duncan, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a question, and maybe you can help me too. How much of students' choices of courses that they actually register for and pay for through their tuition actually goes towards paying for those classes versus what our grants goes towards infrastructure? So I'm curious as to, are we taking selections away from students who willingly pay, or I have the same questions as my previous speakers.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer some of those questions that were brought up regarding this amendment, first of all, on the germane issue, obviously these folks down the hall thought it was germane, and we either had to say absolutely nothing, or we go with the Senate version, and we chose to find some middle ground on it. And so in that sense, that those are the only options that were left to us. And frankly, I'm not sure that the germane issue was consistent with other actions taken by this body and by that body if you go through this budget entirely. So what we were informed of while we were having this committee is we saw several different instances. For example, the AWARE group on campus requires you to take a 2 or 3 credit hour course that has nothing to do with anybody's major, that talks about, you know, various issues that frankly they made it mandatory so that your registration goes to the last day, which means you can't get the courses you need if you don't comply with taking this one specified class through the AWARE program. And when we saw that, we said, actually, we really do need to look at this. We need to look at exactly what UW is requiring. We're not trying to take away your general obligations to get your degree in terms of sciences and English and history. And it just so happens that UW is going to evaluate their curriculum requirements, and they're in the process of they'll start that in early spring. So this is a good opportunity for us to fully understand how they devise their curriculum and what requirements they have that are over and above a major. So we're not interrupting with the obligation to take your fundamental core classes. That's not what this does. We want to know the ones that are outside your core classes, that are mandatory, that add to the costs of educational process, what courses you have to take in order to graduate. So we thought it was a good compromise, and it was the only compromise that we could come to.
All right, we'll keep moving on. So we have on to 56. 56. Representative Larson Lloyd.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, unless you direct me otherwise, there's a couple of questions there not answered. And one is it doesn't take the ability of a student to take any class they want to if it's their choice. And to add on to what the good speaker said, a lot of this isn't just classes, but it's also when they're available and in the cost of the class that some of the that are sometimes in conflict. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll move on to items 56 and 57. This was you'll recall, we come in and on the House side, we limited access to some funds to the university and to the Business Council until they could verify that through the Wyoming Works program that you could, or Shop Wyoming, I'm sorry, the Shop Wyoming, you could sell firearms. On the Senate side, we deleted and further amended their Senate File 10 to say that that $250 is withheld from the University of Wyoming until there's a program made available to Wyoming companies for the sale of firearms. And then we added firearm-related products or both in compliance with the statutes. On 58, we deleted and further amend the House second reading amendment number 27 and deleted the portion there that says if House Bill 61 is not enacted. Item 59, the Supreme Court administration, we modified the footnote there to remove the reference to district courts and just have it be for circuit court judges. On item 60, that's the ECA, where we restored and come back to the Senate position of the $9.3 million. We talked about 61. 62 is Department of Education requiring districts to still, and this is really directed to those farmers in America or in the future of them, to maintain equivalent support of those programs. We deleted House second reading amendment number 46 on the Board of Equalization report. And then, is there any other? I think we have a question back there, Mr. Chairman, on the second half.
Questions off page 3 of the joint conference. Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about line 56 in terms of putting a hold on state aid to the University of Wyoming until there is a program in place to assist Wyoming companies with the sale of firearms, firearm-related products, or both. Could this be fulfilled in a non-virtual manner? Is this specific to a website? Could this be fulfilled by a private vendor? Does it have to be fulfilled by UW? I'd like to point out that on the Shop Wyoming website currently, there are firearm-related products. So does that mean that they are in compliance? And then is there an appropriation for, if there is a new program to be held up, is there an appropriation for that? Thank you.
Representative Gray, any questions on page 3?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On line 56, I'm obviously I supported this amendment, but I'm a little concerned that the amendment was identical on both sides and it's a DFA. I mean, my understanding in terms of process was in a joint conference committee that if the amendments are identical, they're automatically adopted and there is an ability to amend them. So a little bit of a discussion on that, and then a discussion on the fact that, in terms of this germaneness question, I mean, you go from line 55 to 56. 56 is a condition on appropriation too. So, I mean, I think you know, the idea that 55 is non-germane, I mean, I think some of the folks that are opposed to this, I mean, they're just opposed to this. But to say it's non-germane, you know, I'm in favor of the amendment, but to say it's non-germane, I just, conditions upon appropriations, I've seen them 50, 60 times passed in this body since I've been there. And so to say just because it's something that somebody doesn't like, and then it's going to be non-germane, I mean, let's just be consistent, in my opinion, in terms of the germaneness discussion. So if we could just have discussion on, especially on the 56 point, that there was an identical amendment and it was a DFA. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Try to clean up page 3. Representative Larson Lloyd.
So I think the comment
Mr.
that I
Chairman.
made on, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to be corrected, but I think what I said on 55 was that was the amendment that we deemed in this body not to be germane. The other side did not concur with that. I think that we will continue. I would only suggest that we would continue to have discussions in the future on other items in a budget bill that we think are or not germane. And so I think we are trying to be consistent to make sure that things in the budget bill or any other bill are germane. And so this is just reflective on the action that we took.
Representative Henderson, do you have a question on page 3?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 3, item 61 refers to technical correction. I'm sorry, but I just want to clarify my understanding. In one instance, technical corrections were deleted. In this instance, they're not. Could you help me understand? I mean, if it's technical and it's correction like a context or text of the bill, I just don't see what the question is there and why it wouldn't just be done as a matter of course.
Representative Walters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To address the question regarding items number 56 and 57, those were not mirror amendments. There was a difference, and the difference was in the House version, which is item number 57, there was a contingent appropriation for the university as well as for the Business Council. In the Senate version, that contingency or that conditional appropriation was only for the University of Wyoming, and so that's why they were not mirror amendments. And so then we as the conference committee chose to delete number 57 and deleted, but then further amended number 56. And so what that does is that the $250,000 to the university is still conditioned upon the university making sure that there is a similar type of or availability on the current website that is there. After we had discussions with the good university, they said due to some of their federal funding for this, that there may be some restrictions on that payment processor. And so the language says or similar site. And so what they're envisioning is basically a parallel site to the existing site that will be for the sale of firearms. They are moving forward with it. They're going great guns. They're excited to get it done. Pardon the pun. Anyhow, as to the question, what will the startup cost be? They're estimating maybe $10,000 to $20,000 to get the website modified to allow for the sale of firearms on that website. They felt that was a bargain compared to losing $250,000 by doing nothing. And so this was a really good positive outcome, both from what this body and the body down the hall desired to see done, as well as making sure that our good firearm manufacturers here in the state have the opportunity on this website.
Would one of the members please respond to the technical corrections question that Representative Henderson brought? Representative Larson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the good representative from here in the capital cities. Question on technical corrections. It's on our budget bill and in a lot of these bigger bills, when we get going down through there and we go back and reflect, they'll go back before they put the bill together. And it's not uncommon for them to find just these little technical errors, like on item 61, the very last one, technical correction corrects 2022 to 2024. So they make those corrections. The reason we elected to choose this is because it was through the process, it was more accurate and easier for the staff to put together than the one that was up on the top. So, Mr. Chairman, with your
Thank you.
blessing.
Just any further questions? 1 through 3. Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick question on line number 60. Can you explain to me exactly what that deletion applies to? Thank you.
On item number 60, is that
Representative
correct?
Larson. Representative
Mr.
Larson, will you
Mr.
respond?
Speaker, so that was a deletion that was taken out in the Senate second reading, and that was the external cost adjustment for books and utilities. And that was part of a larger amendment, and we brought that back in. That ECA now is back in place.
Further questions? Thank you. Further questions? 1 through 3. 1 through 3. Page 4. Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the top of page 4, where we have item 33 in, maybe I'll turn to
Page,
Page
line,
4.
item 64, please.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 64, thank you. We deleted the second, third reading amendment 13, which was a budget balancer that the staff thought we might have to balance SIPA. We put some of those in anticipation that we might need it. It wasn't needed, so we're deleting it. 66 and 66, or excuse me, 65, 66 and 73 all relate back to our investment of putting the 75 million in the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund corpus and the school. And we went back to the JAC position. We removed that language down on 73 that put a cap on, and on 60, and you'll recall up there on 60, on 65 where our colleagues down the hall removed the 75 that was going to the Common School Land Fund and put it in the PMTF as well. And so we went back, we took those three and went back to the JAC position, the 75 in PMTF and 75 in schools. Item 67, it's budget balancer. On this was $6 million that we was going to put to, that is intended for the municipal solid waste, the landfill remediation. Had some pretty long debate on down the hall. They agreed that we need to continue to fund it, didn't want to do it out of general funds, so we compromised, took that out of the prison fund at half the price. So then, Mr. Chairman, if I can go to item 68, we deleted the Senate third reading amendment number 22 as amended, which was the contract for smart research, contract research. That was, you'll recall, was $4 million from existing funds that was in there with matching. We adopted House Position 69. It was second reading amendment 44, where we added another $10.8 million into state employee compensation. We, on item 70, we deleted and further amended the requiring $10 million of the $100 million appropriation for energy matching fund, that the match shall at least be 1-to-1. That was new language. On item 71, we deleted and further amended and adopted the language to do the study on cash-based budgeting. On 72, we deleted the House position on Wyoming's tomorrow. On 73, we deleted the House position on, I talked about that on the overall cap, and then the last thing we done was deleted the House position on the retirement, paying the retirees a 13th check out of the retirement system. And so, as my colleague pointed out, there was the 13th check and the employees' compensation, the pathways, which was $10 million, and the ECA that really played in harmony with or against each other. And so we felt the greater good was doing the employee compensation, enhancing that, and putting the ECA back in place. And that's, so when you question or contemplate that. That was our rationale. Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to try and answer any further questions.
Thank you. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So 2 years in a row, I believe this body has rejected the idea of putting more into the permanent accounts. And I'm trying to understand first what they did and then what we did. And so it looks to me like they increases general fund transfer to PTMF by 150, decreases general fund transfer to common school to 0. So basically, it's still $150 million going into the permanent accounts. And we say none into the permanent account. But now we're going to go back to 150 million in the permanent accounts, which in my mind is not in between the two positions at all. If I'm mistaken, if it's different than that, please let me know.
Any other members? Any other members? Page 4, page 4, page 4. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kind of to echo the previous question, I think it's really important because part of our deficit problems are really projection paper deficit problems, and that's why this 225, and perhaps cap finance can make that a study issue, and we find out what is the right reserve amount, and are we going to do 4-year projections, or somehow now we've started this new thing that we're going to do 6-year projections? I mean, come on. How far we want to do this thing? And I think, so I think that's got to be a real issue we continue to talk about. I think the common school account will fill up its reserve account again. I think it will on June 30th. And, but I just think, you know, we're only guaranteeing general fund 2.5, 1.25 SIPA. So I don't know. I just wish we'd kind of get to work on filling up that reserve account. And then we can quit all this talk about how we're in some kind of financial crisis all the time. That'll go a long way to help us. So that's my 2 cents on that. I do have a question on item 74 as well. I just think, folks, this account grew by 1.2 billion last year. And to take 5 million for folks who haven't had a COLA in 20 plus years, who retired 30 years ago before wages were increased, I don't think is asking too much. And so I just think it's not going to happen this year, but I think those of you that are sitting in these chairs next year, I don't think it's that hard to kind of do a little bit. And so without really any issue with the funds, I mean, it's not. And so I think we got to keep working at this, and I just bringing this up really to remind us all, there's some pretty easy fixes we could do to help some folks who are in their late 80s and early 90s keep working through this. So, and again, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to, you know, it's the old Abe Lincoln quote, right? And compromise, nothing is wholly good or wholly evil. And you got to find kind of the balance between the two. I think the committee did wonderful work. I think you did a great job. I'm looking at this back page, all these X's are all my amendments, whack, gone, gone, gone. And I'm just like going, yeah, I get it. But in the end, I'm going to support this and vote for it. It's good for Wyoming. Could have been a little better? Yeah, in my humble opinion. But I think it's pretty good. And appreciate all your hard work and the hours of work that this committee put on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Reverend Stiver, then Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is on line 67, where you take the $3 million from the penitentiary capital construction account. How much is in that account, and what was the discussion, and why that account?
Thank you, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to pile on just a little bit, and I don't mean to. And I agree, we don't need to sacrifice good for perfect here, but I do want to make sure that this body and those that return continue to have this discussion, you know, regarding reserve accounts, projections, and permanent funds. Putting money in permanent funds, is that the end of the world? No, it's not at all. Save them for the future. But with how we project If we do not do something with these reserve accounts, we are going to continue with this up and down panic mode of budgeting. And so I'm disappointed that we didn't get more into the reserve account. Good share of revenue. It feels comfortable from his comments that the reserve account will refill. I don't know. It's a long time before that happens in this current environment that we're in. I mean, good example, I just got an email, the price of nickel is going through the roof because of where it gets imported from. We're going to start seeing a lot of ramifications in our everyday life because of the geopolitical instability, and that's going to translate into our investment accounts. So again, I'm not going to sacrifice good for perfect. I wish we would have looked at shoring up these reserve accounts a little bit more to steady out how we do our estimating and get away from always creating crisis when crisis doesn't exist. I also, on 67, you know, the number that was in that budget amendment regarding landfill remediations was a number that we worked on and found it was a solid number. I just assumed that you would have said 0 and made the policy decision that that wasn't important, rather than split it in half and then pull $3 million out of the prison reserve account. That's more commentary than anything. So I appreciate the work. Thank you.
All right. Anybody going to respond to any of the queries on the, I think it was line 67? Representative Larson.
I realize that sometimes when you can't afford the brand of sneakers that your kid would like and you bring them home, they want to reject the whole thing. But I would suggest that $3 million is better than nothing, and hope that it's taken with the intent of what with what it was intended to try and shore up what we think is really an important program to remediate those. And so that was the conversation. I think the good representative over here that flanks us every day has a good concern on the penitentiary account. That'll tip into 20 more, 30 million in it currently. We've got to be careful. You've heard the good chairman from transportation that gets up and he gives us the one-eyed scowl on a regular basis when we do that, and I think that's fair. That was a compromise that we made on that action. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think the good chairman of Minerals and Revenue really made some important points, and I think if there was one failing that we really had is that in July we didn't start talking about correlating this idea of how we're going to use these reserve accounts and move us and protect the corpus in the future. And it takes a lot of water to turn a ship in, and this is one of them that seems to take a lot of time. It made a lot of sense on this side to put it in the reserve account. Couldn't get any motion, couldn't get any action there. We settled where we did, but I think that as we move how we fund our state with these investment incomes in the future, it'd be nice to be able to take those reserve accounts and help build that operating corpus.
Thank you. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say how happy I am that we're arguing over which savings we're going to be putting money into as opposed to which accounts we're going to be cutting from this time around. And above and beyond that, I'd like to just give my sincere thanks to the Appropriations Committee. In my 6 years of being here, this is probably one of the best budgets I've seen as far as taking a look forward, taking a look back and seeing what we've had to deal with, replacing the items and the issues necessary as we've gone through. So my sincere thanks and gratitude to the Appropriations Committee on both sides. But I'm very happy to know on 307 Day, we're arguing about what kind of money we're putting into savings as opposed to how many people we're going to be hurting by cutting more. So Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I thank you to you and thank you to the Appropriations Committee.
Thank you. Chairman Nicholas, bring it home.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple comments on that. On the on the penitentiary fund, there are currently $30 million in that fund, and at the end of the biennium, there'll be $40 million. The testimony before the committee was that what we need is about 52 to 55 million to for any new facility that we construct. So there'll be plenty of funds in that account over time. The current penitentiary should last at least another 15 years. So at some point, we need to, we'll cap that fund, put it someplace safe where people can't tinker with it. But it was just, when they come to us with solution to find money that we don't otherwise have, and they suggested this, we said, well, that's a reasonable compromise. Let's go back to where we started. The ECA, they were a flat no on the ECA. On the pay increase for state employees, up to the 10 million, they were a flat no. So every place that we compromised, that's where we're walking through. Let's talk about the reserve funds. So you recall that without increasing the tip to 225%, if we would have put the education dollars in the reserve fund, right now it tips at 150, so it all would have gone to the permanent fund anyway. And then let's look at what dollars we're talking about. We're talking about ARPA dollars. And so what we're really doing is taking one-time funds from the federal government that we would not otherwise have, and we're saving it into the permanent funds for the next generation and the next generation. 50 to 100 years from now, when coal is gone, when oil and gas are diminished, what's gonna carry the rest of our state forward? And the answer is, what we talked about earlier this session is, we're at 27% of our budget now is funded out of our general fund budget, is funded out of our income. And so we have to raise those income accounts, particularly on the education side, to protect our future. And the next compromise on top of that was, if you look at our sheet on the severance tax funds, we've got 1/3 that will tip on the severance taxes on over the cap, and that's going to be an additional, combined with the FMRs, at least, and this is at $65 a barrel, no, at $90 a barrel, we're going to have an extra $84 million to address our education deficit over the biennium. So what we did by these compromises is we've taken that deficit that you'll see on our profile and at least cut it in half. So we've found a way to help fund education into the next decade by the actions that we took. So it wasn't an easy thing to do. And also on the reserve accounts, we passed Joint Resolution 5 and Resolution 6, so we can go to a single fund component on a reserve fund, which means we'll combine all of our reserve funds at some point in time in the near future, and we can invest it at a higher return. So we're going to work on those reserve accounts because we agree with you. We tried to protect the reserve funds as much as we could, but where we couldn't, we wanted to save it into permanent funds as an alternative. So that's what we had to do with the compromise to get where we got on the ECA and the other components that you see where they adopted our position. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Gray, on the Joint Conference Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to urge a no on the Joint Conference Committee report. I really quickly just want to reiterate that the problem I see in this budget, the big one, is we continue to not find a way to invest dollars in LISRA. And the reason why that's important is that our key deficits, when you get returns out of the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund, very little of it goes towards our key deficits. And so when they say that in the long term, this is going to be huge in solidifying those deficits, the way the tips are, very little of it does that. And I don't think politically that's ever going to happen. So until we find this way to allocate investment returns towards our key deficits, we're going to keep zigzagging because the revenues just aren't there to prop them up when you have a decline in the mineral industry, which is inevitably going to happen in this boom bust cycle that we have. So until we get there, we're going to continue to have structural problems. And I think there are ways to do it, but it just, there has to be a consensus on it. Anyway, I'm just going to urge a no vote on that, largely for that reason and a couple others. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Jennings on the conference committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too probably am going to urge a no vote on this, but I'd like to go back to number 71. And I'd like to hear a little more discussion. When it left this body, we were all for taking the opportunity that all this extra money that came in this time afforded and moving to a cash-based budget. And somehow we moved that to a study. And then I noticed we also struck the November 15th and moved it closer to the next session, so that even if we have the study, it looks to me like it'd probably be even harder to start the implementation process. And so it just seems like, from talking to our colleagues down the hall, it seemed like some of them were very much in favor of this notion of trying to move this forward. So I'd like to hear a little more discussion. How did our side go to from wanting to begin the implementing process to actually defeating something that we held a position on, to go to a study and then move that back further?
Further discussion. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be happy to answer those two prior speakers. On the, the most recent. So the cash-based buzzing bill is down on the Senate floor. And if it passes, it will take precedence over this particular portion of the budget. What this does is, in case it doesn't pass, we still want to do the study and have the evaluation so that, and the CapFin will, subcommittee will come back and basically walk through all the transfers and exchanges, see everything that has to be done and make recommendations on whether, how and when we can go forward with it. So basically this is a backup to the bill itself, because we don't know what's going to happen to it down the hall. With regards to protecting the LISRA, it's a good issue to bring up. So you have your white paper, which is our profile that was distributed on your on your desks, and it's a little bit confusing when you look at this. If you look at page 3 of the profile, and that's where the LISRA is discussed at line 24. The beginning balance of the LISRA at the beginning of the biennium is $1.56 billion. Then if you go down to line 52, you'll see that the projection at the end of the biennium puts the LISRA at $1.45 billion. I just want to point this out because that projection is based upon the Craig. And the Craig in January had $60 oil and less than $4 gas. We know that we're going to have some better returns than that. So the estimate from LSO is, if things stay the way they are, if we can keep $90 a barrel, and it's also no capital gains and nothing over 5% on our returns, we anticipate that it'll be between 1.65 and 1.7 billion in the LSRA at the end of biennium with our current finances and how they proceed. So in fact, we're saving money there as well as into our permanent funds. So I think that we're trying to do the best of all things with this bill. We're using our ARPA dollars to pay for projects that are immediate and needy. This body, you recall, we added $53 million of appropriations to the JAC budget. Down the hall, they added about 23 billion. So we spent more money on this side than they did down the hall. Our compromise takes us to almost dead center, about 36 million added to the overall budget. It saves it, so we take care of the needy that we cut out last year. We have midterm savings in LISRA, and we add money to our permanent savings. So we hope you'll support the JCC report.
Thank you. Further discussion on the report? Seeing none. Seeing none, members, we are voting on Joint Conference Committee Number 1, report to House Bill 1. A majority of the elected members required to adopt the report. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker,
Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly.
No.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn excused. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson.
Aye.
Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson.
Aye.
Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 41 aye, 18 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have adopted Joint Conference Committee Number 1 on House Bill 1. Thank you to our Appropriations Committee and our Joint Conference Committee. We have a couple privileges of the floor. Representative Gray, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. ICAL has a deal in the back, and we have in the audience Mark and Rose Bebo and then Joyce Menke, and they have sort of like a thing in the break room that they provided us. And ICAL's a wonderful. They do a lot of great work, and just wanted to introduce ICAL to the body. Please welcome them to the House. Thank you.
Welcome, Representative Romero Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege.
Please proceed.
Joining us today also is, I think they're still here, Mr. Campbell and 6th grade students from Pioneer Park. Did they take off? I think they took off, but it's because we had a long budget. I apologize.
We'll welcome them anyway. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm hoping they're still here, but we have 2 teachers from Lingle and the Goshen County area. Rachel Gibson and Heather Rutz are here, I think. If they are, please stand up. They may have wandered off as well.
We're losing our audience, folks. We're losing our audience. Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
Please proceed.
Thank you, good members. Just a reminder that we do have these beautiful dishwasher-safe 66th legislative mugs in the Secretary's office. They're about to go down to the Senate. So this is kind of the last call. After this, they'll be heading down to the Senate, and there may not be any left. So if you would like some, please take advantage of that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, members, we're going to take up concurrences now. So you have a list that was placed on your desk. So Chairman, if you'll be queued up, and if you're a sponsor of a bill that is on concurrence, please be ready. The first message for our consideration is message number 209 on House Bill 4. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, I move message 209 and ask for a concurrence on this request. This has to do with House Bill 4, water permits livestock on federal lands. The Senate made one minor change. It's probably a pretty good change, and it just, when it comes to the abandonment of the water right, they put in 5 successive years before abandonment would take place. So I would ask for people to vote aye on this. And thank you.
Thank you. Members on the concurrence request. Any members on the concurrence request? So members, we're voting on a motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 4. A majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly.
Aye.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kinner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson,
Aye.
Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Bear, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 59 aye, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 4. Next message is 211. House Bill 17, Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move concurrence on message 211 and ask for your aye vote. Ladies and gentlemen, what the other body did was went in and made a few probably corrections that needed to be made, technical corrections. If you go to the bill and look at what they deleted the wording subject to approval by the Wyoming Adjutant General. And I can see what they did here because it appears that we've made one agency, State Land and Investment, in some ways subject to another agency's approval, which we really don't do. And they did that in 2 different places. The other one was to strike words in there, and you can read the reference page 2, line 2, and the others, empowered. We don't need to really say that. The statute itself says they're empowered. We give them the authorization by passing the statutes and the bills. So with that, I'd ask for your aye vote.
Discussion on the conference. So members, we are voting to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 17. The majority of the elected members is required. Please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly.
Aye.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson,
Aye.
Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote, are there any changes? Burt, aye to no. Further changes? Oakley? Further changes? Gray, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 50 aye, 9 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 17. Next message, 212, House Bill 33. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move message 212, requesting concurrence on House Bill 33 and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, this is the bill where we made a few amendments to last year's mental health prioritization work. And the Senate made a really, I won't call them cosmetic changes, but they're both on page 5. And one is where we had asked the Department of Health and DFS to promulgate rules and regulations. And the folks down the hall asked those departments to report those rules and regulations to joint labor before implementing. I've verified with the agencies, and there's no trouble getting that in before, we would presumably have an interim meeting before the date. And then a little further down that same page, lines 18, 19, basically, I guess they didn't like our grammar. It's just a rewording of the sentence. So if there's no questions, I'll ask for an aye vote.
Discussion on the message. Discussing on the message. Seeing none, we're voting the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 33. Majority of the members elected is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly.
Aye.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson,
Aye.
Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote, are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed, 58 aye, 1 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 33. The next House Bill 47, Message 213, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move message number 213, concurrence request for House Bill 47, local impact assistance payments. Members, I'm going to ask for an aye vote. I'll explain the reason why. Well, the two gentlemen in this House that have been working this issue strongly agree with this amendment. It has been, as we go through a negotiation with the local governments sort of along the I-80 corridor, I'll say, with respect to the wind development projects. We have, if you recall, we've put in a staggered, more progressive type of program. And the part that is being amended here is a discretionary component. So we're talking about that lower threshold, and this is in the bill itself, is that you can come in and exceed 2.55% with the permission of the council and for justification and so forth. All that has happened is that amount has been raised up to 2.76, which I believe was an amendment on the House floor. And so, again, this bill has been around for quite a few years, contentious, and I don't think I'm out of line saying that this is a final negotiation on this for an improvement to the reimbursement under this program, and therefore I'll ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members on message 213? 213, members on 213. Members are voting a motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 47. A majority of the elected members required. Please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Ackland, Ayer, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson,
Aye.
Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 51 aye, 8 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 47. Next message, 214, House Bill 52, Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move message 214 to House Bill 52 and would ask you to vote aye. What the Senate did to the timeline to prepare and process absentee ballot, really it's just kind of two cleanup / protections amendments they made. One, you'll see there on page 2, line 20. If there's anything else in the election code when it comes to counting absentees, it applies across the board. Should they decide, and this again is if your county clerk decides to engage in this, would have to follow every other thing in the election code. And then on page 3, line 19, they just add the word made known. And so obviously whoever's feeding the machine, the ballots might, know some names on there. As long as they don't make those known to anyone else, you wouldn't have a prosecution. Obviously, somebody has to hold the ballot to feed it into the machine and could look at it, and we didn't want to make that a crime for just doing what their job is. So happy to take any questions, but I think they're two pretty easy fixes and would ask you to vote aye.
Discussion, message 214, House Bill 52. Discussion? Seeing none, members, we are voting on a motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 52. Majority of the elected members required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson,
Aye.
Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 47 aye, 12 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 52. Next, House Bill 80, Message 217, Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Message 217 to House Bill 80, Campaign Report Amendments, but ask for your favorable aye vote. And you'll remember this discussion we had on the penalty for violating this section. We had some amendments that didn't pass through on this $500 a day automatic penalty after the order was finalized. What our good friends down the hall did in this respect was just say up to $500 a day. So we're not trying to go after, your a state legislative candidate if they did something right, even with an order. We are trying to go after the large, 5-digit or more number entities that are violating our laws. That $500 a day might make a difference before violating our laws. So I think this does give the Secretary of State's office flexibility. Might be a little more power than we give them in other areas of campaign law, but I think in this case, it's probably appropriate that they could set the decision on what that would be. But happy to answer any questions if there are any, but otherwise vote aye.
Thank you. Discussion, Message 217, House Bill 80. Discussion. Seeing none, members, we are voting on a motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 80. Majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly.
Aye.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson,
Aye.
Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
Aye.
Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. Schwartz? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 41 aye, 18 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 80. Next, Message 223, House Bill 42, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move message number 223 to House Bill 42 and ask for your non-concurrence or your no vote. Ladies and gentlemen, you may recall this is the local governments bill. where we added, in addition to the 105 million, we added 15 more million, equivalent to a consensus block grant to the various cities, towns, and counties. When it went down to our friends on the other side, for the last 15 million, they kind of turned the formula upside down and remodified it. And it affects millions of dollars through our current distribution formula. And frankly, it's hard to understand. I've got a spreadsheet that kind of walks through all of them if you'd like to see it. But we need to go down and see what they were thinking and why they were doing it, and make sure that we have a fair distribution of those funds.
Other members, Representative Schwartz on the message.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too would urge a no vote. When the bill left this House, it was fundamentally two appropriations. We had left the original 105 million intact with the same formula we'd used in the previous biennium. Not only did they change that by making it one appropriation for 120 million instead of two separate, but then to make it even more complicated, they changed the formula. And it just creates winners and losers. Depending whether you're more interested in your particular municipality or your county, you can look at it one way or the other. But I think it's imperative that we sit down with our colleagues down the hall and try and get a better understanding of what they've done and see if it's acceptable. So please vote no.
Representative Sweeney, so members, these are concurrences. We do second or third reading speaking rules. So Representative Sweeney, first time on the concurrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I too encourage a no vote. And I thought you might want to hear from a non-appropriator. While this may look like a good deal for your municipalities, in general, I don't believe it's the way we should go. When they wrapped the consensus funding, which I'll remind you, we had lost the consensus funding because we didn't have funds. And that's why it came back separately. But now that our colleagues down the hall wrap those two programs together, and then, as the good chairman of appropriations alluded to, turn the funding model and the distribution model on its ear, I think there's plenty of room here to try to come to a compromise and have a better understanding of what this actually does to our counties and absolutely to our municipalities. So I urge a no vote. I think it's better off if we can keep those models separate like they were before, and I think both will end up better. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize for piling on, but I think it'd be good to hear from a district where this new model benefits everybody within his district, and I am a no vote. The direct funding model has been worked through this body for many years and works very, very well. To have it changed in this fashion, I think, is a dangerous path forward. If we decide to do consensus funding, which we have done in the past, and what this body did was 15 million for consensus funding, which is different than the direct distribution, consensus funding with a match. It was a good idea. It was a good idea this year, and there's nothing wrong with it. But to take it and mess with a formula that, as a general rule, works very, very well, to me is dangerous. We start, I could very easily get up here because, last hurrah, my district gets more money. I won't do that. I'm going to look at what's best for the state of Wyoming and encourage a no vote. Thank you.
Any other members on the message? So members, we are voting on a motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 42. A majority of the elected members required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn excused, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez. Repeat. Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson,
No.
Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson,
No.
Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker, closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Jennings, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 6 aye, 53 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted not to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 42. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move that the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Committee announcements. Committee announcements. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, will not have a meeting at lunch, but we will have a joint meeting with our colleagues from the other body at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning in room 110W.
Thank you. Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will meet in 10 minutes to consider one bill, Senate File 62.
Thank you. Further announcements? Further announcements. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, your Ag Committee is finished with committee meetings, but we do have a special treat on Thursday at 9 o'clock. We'll have an Ag Issues team. It's an FFA team that has been incredibly successful. They're a dynasty in the nation. With the teams, they've had several, not just state championships, but national championships. They will be honing up their skills by presenting their I'm trying to think of what it's called. It will be on the 30-30 plan of the Biden administration. It will be very interesting. You can ask questions after you're done and help this team polish up for nationals. You're welcome. 9 o'clock on Thursday morning.
Thank you. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House appropriations will meet in 15 minutes after we have a quick bite to review Senate File 112, Senate File, gotta read this though, 82, I think that's 56 and 97.
Further announcements. Further announcements. So members, I think when we come back from lunch, we'll be going into second and third reading, and then we'll be on general file. This day, members, is a kind of a very important deadline in our role as the legislative branch, so that we make sure that we reserve every power that we can when it comes to some of those important issues. So we may have a longer day waiting on some joint conference committees on a couple bills. So it might be a long day. We'll continue to do good work. We may take a break at some point. We may have to come back in the evening to make sure we can accomplish what needs to be accomplished as the legislative branch of government. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just one more committee announcement. Your committee number 3 will meet tomorrow morning, Tuesday at 9 a.m., Capitol Extension 3, to hear Senate Joint Resolution 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further business, the House is in recess until 2 p.m.